You made $37,000 last year, and every financial expert on the internet told you the same thing: save 20% of your income. So let's do what they never actually do. Let's run the numbers. After taxes, you bring home $2,528 a month. Rent takes $1,400. Utilities, food, transportation, student loans, health insurance, phone, that's another $1,470. You're not 20% short. You're $342 in the negative before you save a single cent. That's not a budgeting problem. That's arithmetic. In 1985, the median income covered all expenses with 34% left over. Today, the median income doesn't cover expenses at all. Yet every bank, every app, every talking head still pushes the same formula, a formula built for an economy that died 40 years ago. They're not repeating it because it works. They're repeating it because they profit every single time you try and fail. And the reason why the actual mechanism that turns your discipline into their revenue is something no savings article, no budgeting app, no financial literacy class will ever explain. Because the moment you understand how savings accounts actually function inside the banking system, you'll realize you were never building wealth, you were funding theirs. In 1985, a 22-year-old with a high school diploma could walk into a factory, earn the equivalent of $54,000 in today's dollars, and buy a median home for $82,000, roughly 1.5 times their annual salary. Tuition at a public university ran $1,300 a year. Pensions covered 60% of workers. Interest on a basic savings account hit 7, 8, sometimes 10%, double or triple the inflation rate. That wasn't luck. That was architecture. Post-war policy, strong unions, regulated banking, and a tax code that hadn't yet been rewritten to favor capital over labor, all of it built a conveyor belt from paycheck to property to pension. And then, piece by piece, every support beam was pulled out. Pension obligations shifted to 401k, gambles in 1978, real wages flatlined after 1979 and never recovered. The Glass-Steagall Act was gutted in 1999, unleashing the banking free-for-all that turned your deposits into Wall Street's leverage. Tuition exploded 1,200%, while median income grew just 10%. None of this was accidental. Every policy change had a beneficiary, and it wasn't you. Here's what makes it worse, and this is the part that should make you furious. While the economic floor was being ripped out, the advice stayed frozen. Your parents told you what their parents told them. Go to school, get a degree, save your money, buy a house. They weren't lying. They were repeating instructions from a manual that expired before you were born, and that gap between the advice you inherited and the economy you actually entered isn't just inconvenient, it's the trap itself. Because when you follow 1985 rules in a 2025 economy and fail, the system doesn't blame the rules, it blames you, lazy, entitled, bad with money. That shame keeps you trying harder inside a framework designed to extract from you, not build for you. Meanwhile, median rent increased 130% since 2000, while median wages for workers under 30 grew just 18%. Student debt crossed $1.7 trillion. The average Gen Z worker enters the economy $37,000 in the hole before earning a single dollar, and every institution around them insists the formula still works. But the formula stopped working the moment expenses outpaced income, and that moment wasn't last year. It was decades ago. The question nobody asks is why the institutions that profit from your deposits, your debt payments, and your labor never updated the playbook. Let me show you the math on what they built instead. Let's follow the math to who's on the other end of that equation. When you deposit your paycheck into a savings account earning 0.01 to 4.5% APY, your bank doesn't park that money in a vault. They lend it out at 7% for mortgages you can't qualify for, at 24% for the credit cards you'll need when your savings account can't cover an emergency. JP Morgan reported $89.3 billion in net interest income in 2023 alone. That's the spread between what they pay you and what they charge borrowers, many of whom are you. The $12 billion financial advice industry sells courses and apps to fix a problem that isn't behavioral, it's structural. Employers benefit too, a workforce terrified of losing health insurance, desperate to fill an emergency fund that mathematically can't exist, doesn't negotiate, doesn't quit, doesn't organize. Landlords and REITs raise rent 8% annually, while your savings grow at 4% every year. The distance between your account balance and a down payment gets wider, not smaller. These aren't villains in a back room. They're rational actors inside a system where your compliance is the product. Now look at the other side of the ledger, our side. The median Gen Z worker earns $37,000, enters the workforce $37,000 in student debt, and faces a housing market where the median home costs 7.5 times their annual income compared to 1.5 times for their parents at the same age. We're not undertrained. We're the most credentialed generation in American history, holding more bachelor's degrees per capita than any before us, and earning less in real terms than high school graduates did in 1975. The stakes aren't abstract. For every year we follow the old savings playbook, asset prices outpace our deposits by 4 to 11 percentage points. That's not stagnation, that's compounding in reverse. We get poorer by saving. They get richer by lending what we saved. And here's what none of them will explain. The interest rate your bank advertises isn't the number that determines whether you build wealth or lose it. There's a second number one they never put on the billboard, and once you see how it works, you'll understand why the savings account was never meant to be your ladder out. It was designed to be their floor. Here's the mechanism they buried in plain sight. When you deposit money into a savings account at 4% APY, you're told your money is growing. But inflation runs between 3.5 and 7% annually, and that's the number they never put next to the interest rate. At 4% savings and 5% inflation, you lose 1% of your purchasing power every year you save responsibly. Meanwhile, asset prices, homes, equities, commercial real estate appreciate 8 to 15% per year. Every 12 months you follow the playbook. The gap between your account balance and actual wealth widens by 4 to 11 percentage points. That's not a flaw in the system. That's the system. Your savings account isn't a wealth-building tool, it's a holding pen. Your deposits become the bank's lending capital deployed at 7 to 24% to borrowers who are also you, buying things you can't afford because your savings can't keep pace. You fund the loans you'll eventually need, and the cruelest layer, the credit score, the single number that determines your borrowing cost, requires debt to build. No debt, no history, no history. Bad score. Bad score. Higher rates, you're penalized for staying out of the trap and charged more for entering it late. That's not advice. That's a trap. One designed so that every rational choice you make, save instead of borrow, avoid debt, live within your means, actively worsens your financial position relative to asset holders. The system doesn't reward discipline, it monetizes it. But the financial mechanics are only the visible machinery. Underneath sits something harder to see and far more effective. The fact that you were never taught how any of this works, and that absence isn't an accident. Only 23 states require any form of financial education in high school, and even those curricula teach budgeting and checkbook balancing skills from a 1990s economy, while omitting how fractional reserve banking multiplies your deposits into lending profits, how inflation functions as a silent tax transferring purchasing power from wage earners to asset holders, or how the tax code charges a W-2 worker 22 to 37%, while long-term capital gains, the income type of the already wealthy, caps at 20%. You were taught that compound interest is your friend, but only from the savings side. Nobody showed you the borrowing side, where that same math turns a $6,000 credit card balance into $14,000 over 5 years at 24% APY. The rate you'll pay because your thin credit file from responsibly avoiding debt flags you as a risk. The educational gap, the credit paradox, the tax asymmetry, the inflation drain, these don't cancel each other out. They compound. Each mechanism feeds the next, tightening a loop that gets harder to escape with every year you spend inside it. And none of this is theory. Let me show you the math, dollar by dollar, year by year, on exactly how much this design has already cost you. Let me show you the math. Take the median salary everyone keeps citing as reasonable, $56,000 gross. Sounds livable until the federal government takes its cut. 24% effective tax rate drops you to $42,560, or $3,547 a month. Rent on a median one-bedroom, $1,800. Student loan minimum, $400. Health insurance after your employer's generous contribution, $300. Groceries, not eating out, just feeding yourself, $380. Transportation to the job that pays you this, $350. Utilities, phone, internet, the baseline cost of existing in a modern economy, $270. Total, $3,500. You have $47 left. $47 between you and the 20% savings rule that says you should be banking $710 a month. You're not 5% short, you're 93% short. And this isn't the minimum wage worker. This is the median, the person the system points to and says, see, the economy works. The economy works for someone. Run that $47 through 12 months, that's $564 a year in theoretical savings, assuming zero emergencies, zero car repairs, zero medical copays, zero birthday gifts, zero anything unplanned in 365 days of being alive. One urgent care visit, average cost $250, erases 5 months of progress. One flat tire deletes for the average American faces 3.5 financial emergencies per year, costing $1,400 total. Your annual savings capacity is $564. Your annual emergency cost is $1,400. You don't have a savings problem. You have a math problem, and the math says you go backwards $836 every single year you do everything right. Now compound that backwards momentum against what you're supposedly saving toward. A median home in 2025 costs $420,000. A standard 20% down payment, $84,000, at your maximum theoretical savings rate of $564 per year. Before emergencies erase it, reaching that down payment takes 149 years, not a typo, 149 years, even if you earned $56,000 and somehow squeezed out $500 a month, skipping every emergency, every unexpected cost, every human moment that costs money, you'd still need 14 years just for the down payment. By then, at the historical housing appreciation rate of 5.4% annually, that same home costs $882,000. Your down payment target just doubled while you were saving for the first one. This is the treadmill, and it speeds up the longer you run. A boomer earning the inflation-adjusted equivalent in 1985 needed 2.8 years of savings for a down payment on a median home. Same job title, same discipline, same effort, 1/5 the time. The difference isn't work ethic. It's the distance between what a dollar earned and what a dollar bought, and that distance has been engineered wider every single decade since. You're not failing to save. You're being mathematically outrun by a system that accelerates faster than your income ever will. Here's where the compound effect turns from unfair to irreversible. Every year you can't invest because you're negative. $836 after emergencies on a median salary, the S&P 500 returns an average of 10.2%. A dollar invested at age 22 becomes $34. By age 60, a dollar invested at age 35, after 13 years of trying to save and failing, becomes only $10. You didn't lose $24. The system collected it as a delay tax, and that tax compounds against you forever. Run the full timeline. If you could invest $500 a month starting at 22, you'd retire at 60 with $1.14 million. Start at 35 because the math didn't work until then. $370,000. Same monthly contribution, same discipline, same market, 67% less wealth, not because you failed, but because the economy held you underwater during the only years when compound interest actually works in your favor. The math doesn't lie. They gave you the formula for wealth and then made it impossible to plug in the first number. Every year of delay isn't neutral, it's a transfer. Your loss compounding becomes someone else's lending profit, someone else's rent check, someone else's quarterly earnings beat. The game isn't broken. The game charges admission during the only window when the ticket is worth buying, and then raises the price every year you can't afford it. Here's the moment it all collapses into a single number. Take everything we just calculated, the $564 annual savings capacity, the $1,400 in average emergencies, the $836 annual deficit, and run it against the 3 milestones every financial advisor says define a successful life: emergency fund, homeownership, retirement. A 6-month emergency fund at median expenses requires $17,220 at your real savings rate after emergencies. You'll never reach it, not in 10 years, not in 30. The number moves away from you. A down payment on a median home requires $84,000 and takes 149 years at your actual capacity. Retirement at 65 requires roughly $1.2 million, and you're starting at negative $836 a year. Add those three numbers together, $1,301,220 in lifetime financial targets, your lifetime surplus at the median salary, working 43 years with zero raises above inflation, zero layoffs, zero medical disasters, zero recessions. Negative $35,948. You don't fall short of the milestones. You finish your entire working life owing the gap money. Every milestone they told you to chase was already behind you before you started. Sit with that for a second. Not the number, the feeling, that slow-burning realization that you did the homework, showed up on time, followed the instructions, and the answer was never going to work. Not because you rounded wrong or forgot to carry the one, but because the equation was written so that your side always comes up negative. That anger you're feeling right now, that isn't entitlement. That's pattern recognition. You're not upset because life is hard. You're upset because you just watched the proof that hard doesn't matter inside this framework. A boomer with the same job title, the same work ethic, the same 20% savings discipline hit all three milestones by age 40. Same formula, same effort. Different economy, one where income exceeded expenses by a margin wide enough to make the math actually function. They didn't have more discipline. They had an economy where discipline was rewarded instead of harvested. The moment that distinction becomes clear is the moment the shame dissolves, and what replaces it is something far more dangerous to the system than your compliance ever was. This is how the game actually works. Every dollar of your deficit is a dollar of someone else's surplus. Your negative $836 doesn't vanish. It flows upward. It becomes the landlord's 8% annual rent increase. It becomes JPMORGAN's $89.3 billion in net interest income. It becomes the employer's leverage to keep your salary flat because you can't afford to quit. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed so that your discipline, your savings attempts, your 20% ambition all convert into lending capital, debt interest, and labor compliance for the people who wrote the rules. The breaking point isn't when you run out of money. It's when you realize the math was never supposed to add up for you. It was supposed to add up for them. And every year you spent trying harder inside their framework, you weren't climbing out of the hole. You were digging it deeper and handing the dirt to the people standing above you. Here's what the next 5 years look like if you keep following the playbook. Your student loan balance, $37,000 at 6.8%, accrues $2,516 in interest this year alone, and your minimum payment barely covers it. You'll pay $400 a month for 10 years and hand back. $48,000 on a $37,000 loan, $11,000 in pure extraction for the privilege of being qualified for a job that doesn't cover your bills. Meanwhile, rent climbs 8% annually. Your $1,800 one-bedroom becomes $2,645 within 5 years. Your salary, if you're lucky, grows 3% from $56,000 to $64,900. Run those side by side. Your housing cost rises $845 a month, while your take-home rises $370. The gap widens by $475 every month. Every year, compounding in the wrong direction. That emergency fund the experts say you need, at your real savings capacity, you're not building one. You're watching the target pull away. One medical bill, one layoff, one transmission failure, and you're not starting over. You're starting from deeper in the hole than where you began, with a credit card at 24% waiting to catch what your savings account never could. Fast forward to the 10-year mark, and the consequences stop being monthly stress, they become permanent closures. The homeownership window doesn't narrow gradually, it slams shut. At 5.4% annual appreciation, the $420,000 median home becomes $718,000 by 2035. Your down payment target jumps from $84,000 to $143,600, and you haven't saved the first one yet. Without property, you build zero equity. Every rent check is a wealth transfer with no return, and over 15 years, you'll hand a landlord $400,000 or more with nothing to show for it. Your retirement account, if it exists, holds $12,000 instead of the $180,000 it should hold by 35 to stay on track for $1.2 million by 65. That gap doesn't close. At 40, you'd need to invest $2,800 a month to catch up on a salary that can't cover $500. Career, mobility freezes because you can't survive 3 months without a paycheck. So you take the safe promotion instead of the risky leap, the lateral move instead of the startup, the good enough instead of the thing that might actually change the trajectory. Your life contracts to fit the math, and the math is a cage. Now extend the timeline to its logical end and watch what doing everything right actually purchases. At 65, with 43 years of median income labor behind you, your Social Security benefit averages $1,907 a month, $22,884 a year, 16% below the poverty line for most metropolitan areas. Your 401k, underfunded for decades because the surplus never existed, holds maybe $120,000, enough to last for years if you spend modestly and never get sick. 78% of Gen Z already report financial stress as their primary anxiety source. 46% say money problems have damaged their mental health. And here's the part that should haunt every policy conversation in this country. This isn't a generation that stopped trying. This is a generation running the numbers in real time and discovering that the math returns a negative no matter how they arrange the variables. The shame, the quiet corrosive belief that you're failing because you're not disciplined enough, not smart enough, not sacrificing enough, that shame is the system's last product. It keeps you blaming yourself instead of reading the spreadsheet, but you've read it now. This is not personal failure. This is systematic extraction, and every year you spend inside it without seeing it clearly is a year it takes from you that you will never get back. Everything you just saw, the deficit, the compounding loss, the milestones that were behind you before you started, that's not information designed to crush you, it's designed to free you. Because the most expensive thing you can carry in this economy isn't debt. It's the belief that the old rules still apply. The moment you stop measuring your life against a formula built for 1985 incomes and 1985 costs, something shifts. You stop asking, why can't I save 20%? And start asking, who profits when I try? You stop blaming your discipline and start auditing the incentives. That's not cynicism, it's literacy. The real kind, not the kind they teach in those 23 states with a curriculum from the Clinton era. Every principle that actually works in this economy begins with one question. Does this advice benefit me, or does it benefit the institution giving it? Savings accounts pay you 4%, so banks can lend it. Employer retirement matches vest over 4 years, so you won't quit during your most productive window. Student loans start accruing before you earn a degree, so the balance is already a cage by graduation. The pattern is always the same. The advice sounds like help. The math reveals extraction. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is hard. The system made it hard on purpose. But understanding the board changes how you move on it. You're not a victim. You're someone who just read the spreadsheet they never wanted you to open. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, and now you know for whom. So here's the question that should follow you out of this video and into every financial decision you make for the rest of your life. If every institution that touches your money, your bank, your employer, your landlord, your lender, your government profits more when you stay confused, stay compliant, and stay one emergency away from dependence, then who exactly is the financial literacy they're selling designed to educate? Not you, not for your benefit. The direction from here isn't a hack or a shortcut or a 5-step plan. It's a permanent shift from following rules to interrogating them, from saving currency to understanding assets, from hoping the formula works to running the numbers yourself every time on everything. Before you hand over a single dollar, they gave you a bucket and told you to fill it. They didn't mention they drilled a hole in the bottom, but now you've seen the hole. And the next question, the one that changes everything, is what replaced savings as the actual mechanism for building wealth in this economy, and why every institution you interact with has a financial incentive to make sure you never learn the answer. That's next.